Welcome to the Butterfly Effect. I'm Chris Horner. This is stage 10 of the Vuelta a España. This is the first individual time trial of this year's 2023 Tour of Spain. And if you remember right, they had lightning strikes at the team time trial on stage 1, and all of the riders were having to deal with late night sun disappearing and then storms coming in. It was wet and slippery. It was miserable out there for the Jumbo-Visma team trying to leave the ramp. And then, of course, for Soudal Quick-Step, that finished basically completely in the dark with the headlights of the cars and the rain coming down at the finish. It was magnificent ride from Soudal Quick-Step to stay within 6 seconds of the race stage winner team there on the team time trial of DSM. But there's been chaos throughout this year's Vuelta a España throughout the first week of racing, but it's been very exciting throughout the first week of racing too. Today's individual time trial has got a lot of questions. Can Sepp Kuss, the American, wearing the race leader's red jersey here, Sepp Kuss, can he hold on to his position here, top of the general classification, above Remco Evenepoel and his own two teammates, Primoz Roglic and Jonas Vingegaard? And let me remind you, Marc Soler is right there, just over 40 seconds in second place on the general classification for UAE team members, so he can get himself into the race leader's red jersey if Sepp Kuss was to falter a little bit here on the individual time trial of stage 10. Now, when the cameras come on, I want to highlight, and we'll move us a little bit forward and go up to Stefan Bissinger, who's in the hot seat. We all know the EF Education rider is the time trial specialist, and whether or not if he can pull out a good time in the time trials when we're talking late in the Grand Tours, that's a different story, but he's in the hot seat. Next rider to take off that's really flying here early in the Vuelta a España stage 10, that's Filippo Ganna, the two-time past individual world time trial champion. But Remco Evenepoel is the current individual time trial champion. But Filippo Ganna does have his Italian national individual championship jersey on too. So there's a lot of power in the field here at the Vuelta a España. And we know Filippo Ganna is a big-time favorite to be able to win the stage. Now, he starts flying. He's catching guys left and right in the first 5 kilometers. He's coming up to the Total Energy rider and flies by him like he's standing still. Next rider is going to be from Trek Segafredo, Julian Bernard. Goes flying by Julian Bernard, and then he comes up to the Caja Rural rider. Same scenario. This guy, Filippo Ganna, is doing 60+ kilometers an hour. Next rider he's coming up to, Gabriel Xavier Lidl Trek. He's flying up to him, and you see that Filippo Ganna has to come off the TT position, tap his front brake just a hair, or at least get his hand there to be careful because he's not certain with the roundabout coming up and Gabriel Xavier Lidl Trek if he's going to start moving over to the right side of the curve. He doesn't. Look at Filippo Ganna, man, just puts his arms right back in the TT position and shoots straight past the right side there. Gabriel Xavier through the roundabout. Now he's doing 60+ kilometers an hour going into the finish of today, stage 10 of the Vuelta a España. He'll come across the finish and he's going 1 minute 19 seconds faster than, of course, Stefan Bissinger from EF Education. That will put Filippo Ganna into the hot seat here early in today's individual time trial. Now, the next rider I want to talk about is Nelson Oliveira from Movistar. Nelson Oliveira has a solid ride, and he crosses the line to put himself second on today's stage, 1 minute and 12 seconds down on Filippo Ganna. Why did I want to mention that? Well, I like to have at least 1 or 2 time gauges to mark there from Filippo Ganna because we know Filippo Ganna is the big time favorite here. And at 56 kilometers an hour that he averaged coming into the finish of today's stage, when we round it all up for the 25.8 kilometer stage, we know that it's a solid time. But when you start looking at Nelson Oliveira from Movistar, the Portuguese rider who's a national time trial champion himself, and normally goes top 5, top 10 in individual time trials. The win is pretty rare for Nelson Oliveira, but to go top 5 and top 10, you have a marker now from Filippo Ganna there to Nelson Oliveira when we start talking about the other GC favorites that haven't yet left the ramp. Now, we'll see Filippo Ganna start taking a little bit of a nap, but he starts waking up about the time Matteo Cattaneo comes across the line for second on today's stage for the Soudal Quick-Step rider. That means now when we start looking at the next guys leaving the ramp, these are going to be all the GC favorites. We're talking Vlasov, we're talking UAE Team Emirates with Almeida, and of course Ayuso. Then we're getting into Jonas Vingegaard that's going to be leaving the ramp. Primoz Roglic has got to leave the ramp after Jonas Vingegaard. Remco Evenepoel is going to take off from the ramp. And then we're going to start getting into the higher guys on the general classification when we're talking Lenny Martinez leaving the ramp, followed up, of course, by the UAE Team Emirates, Marc Soler. Soler is followed by the race leader's red jersey of Sepp Kuss. As Sepp Kuss leaves the ramp, that means Filippo Ganna needs to start paying attention. So no more time for napping in the hot seat for Filippo Ganna when you got the top 11 on the general classification going off the ramp. Now, the big guys to keep a mark on when we start seeing the first time check, it's Primoz Roglic. He comes through the first time check, 10 seconds down on Filippo Ganna. But this is early in the stage, and the Slovenian is a time trial specialist too. So if he can hold the lead here and gain back a little bit of time, he might be able to win the stage. And most importantly, well, the next time check's coming from Remco Evenepoel, and Remco Evenepoel's 11 seconds down on Filippo Ganna's time, so he's 1 second behind Primoz Roglic. If I back the film up before anybody left the ramp here on today's stage 10 of the Vuelta a España, we know that Remco Evenepoel's main objectives here on stage 10 is not to win the stage. That's a gift if he can, right? You always take a stage win. But the main objective has to be able to gain time on Sepp Kuss, not lose time to Primoz Roglic or Jonas Vingegaard. And when you look at that first time check, he's 1 second down on the Slovenian Primoz Roglic. Now, we're going to see Jonas Vingegaard come through the time check. He's about 25 seconds down on Filippo Ganna. So that means Remco Evenepoel doesn't have to worry about Jonas Vingegaard on the stage. And of course, unless, of course, he can find some magical legs like we saw at that last individual time trial of the Tour de France from Jonas Vingegaard. But let me remind you guys, during the Tour de France, he didn't lose time on the first time check. He was flying all the way through that individual time trial. So now when I'm sitting on the Chesterfield, I'm thinking Jonas Vingegaard's form is not what he had in the Tour de France, so he's not going to be able to gain that time back here on stage 10. But keep in mind, if he doesn't have that form, he won't be so magnificent going into the later mountain stages here at the Tour of Spain to be able to attack Remco Evenepoel either. But that's in the case that he doesn't continue to get better, because maybe Jonas Vingegaard's form will get better. Now, up front, we're going to see Primoz Roglic. He's flying through the corners. He's got everything dialed in nicely. He's coming up to the finish line here. He's going to cross today's finish line 36 seconds down to put himself second on the stage at this moment here on stage 10. But 36 seconds, that's a little bit back from Filippo Ganna's time. So there's room there for Remco Evenepoel if he can beat Filippo Ganna like he did in the World's Individual Time Trial Championships before the Vuelta a España started proper. He can gain time on Primoz Roglic, but he was behind Primoz Roglic earlier. Now, when the cameras come back to Remco Evenepoel, you see he's got 14 seconds up on Primoz Roglic, and now it's just a battle of whether or not if he's going to win the stage. He comes in under the last final 1K. He's got about 15 seconds there to play with, but he's a little bit too far. Clock ticks down to 200 meters to go, and it's at 0. So we know right now Filippo Ganna is going to win today's individual time trial championship, and we see the little smile up there from the Ineos rider. Remco Evenepoel pulls hard all the way to across the line, and he'll finish 16 seconds back on the time of Filippo Ganna, but up on Primoz Roglic by about 20 seconds. Now, Jonas Vingegaard's the next big-time favorite here to cross the line. He's going to pull through, and he's going to lose a ton of time at 1 minute and 18 seconds to Filippo Ganna here on stage 10. This was probably one of the big hits for Jumbo-Visma right here with Jonas Vingegaard losing time. Primoz Roglic kind of salvaged it and kept it close enough. So now let's go back out and see what's out on the road. Because, of course, we have the race leader's red jersey out there with Sepp Kuss and Soler. Marc Soler is gaining time on Sepp Kuss, but can he make up 23 seconds? Well, we see Soler go all the way into the line, pulling as hard as he can. He'll cross today's finish line at 1 minute and 12 seconds. When Sepp Kuss crosses the line, he's just a little bit further back from Marc Soler at 1 minute and 29 seconds, so he'll lose 1 minute and 13 seconds to Remco Evenepoel, and he'll continue to hold the race leader's red jersey for the U.S. Congratulations, Sepp Kuss. That was a solid ride here on today's stage 10 of the Vuelta a España. And let me tell you guys a few bit of the tactics when you're looking at a course, because it's 25.8 kilometers long, but basically flat with just a little bump. That means the speeds are going to be crazy fast, and anytime the speeds are fast, it's really hard to produce power for climbers because our legs are pretty small and we don't have big muscles. So when you're going uphill and the RPMs are slower and the speed's slower, you're in the power of the pedal, meat of the pedal power right there longer to be able to get your power meter to read higher. But when you're here at these fast individual time trials and the cranks are spinning so fast, it takes a bit longer to produce that power, so the numbers don't go up as high as what you would see, as easily anyways, that you would see on the mountain stages versus these flat stages. So the big riders like Filippo Ganna could produce big power, and then riders like Remco Evenepoel, who's got himself such a fine aerodynamic position and still light in size, but with a lot of power in the hips and in the legs. That's why he's so good at these individual time trials like we see here on stage 10, and why he ran second to, of course, Filippo Ganna, who won today's stage. Now, when we look a little further back, a lot of riders had some good times. UAE Team Emirates had solid rides. Marc Soler did a good ride in today's race to stay and even move up a little bit closer to Sepp Kuss in the general classification, so he's still second. Remco Evenepoel dislodged the riders in front of him, like Mikel Landa that he caught at the finish of today's stage, to move into third to round out the podium here on the general classification. And he's only 1 minute and 9 seconds back of Sepp Kuss. So he's looking in fine position right now if he can tactically make up for some of that time that he lost on stage 6 to Sepp Kuss in these later mountain stages. Whether or not if the American Sepp Kuss will drop off of the wheel there of Remco Evenepoel when we start getting into these bigger mountain stages with the last 2 weeks of the Vuelta a España to come, that's what we have to wait and see. But right now, when you're talking about Jumbo-Visma, they got to be pretty happy with Sepp Kuss still in the red. Primoz Roglic only losing a little bit of time. He's just under 30 seconds on the general classification to Remco Evenepoel, but his race leader's holding red. So Remco Evenepoel still has to do a lot of work to be able to drop Sepp Kuss and then hold off Primoz Roglic and Jonas Vingegaard. But he's got a little more time now on that buffer there to Jonas Vingegaard, who had not a spectacularly bad stage 10 here, but it wasn't perfect, and that's why we saw him shaking his head when he crossed the finish line at today's stage 10. And it lets us know, of course, that he doesn't have that spectacular Tour de France form that he had in July. So maybe he gets better or maybe it doesn't, because you got to remember, it's been a long season for Jonas Vingegaard, winning all the way from the beginning of the season all the way through Dauphiné and then, of course, the Tour de France. Whether or not if he can get that level of form back up here at the Tour of Spain is a question mark, and it might even continue to drop down here at the Tour of Spain. So at some point in time, Jumbo-Visma might have to start thinking, well, is Primoz Roglic is our number one, that's kind of clear, but is Sepp Kuss above Jonas Vingegaard? Those are questions that need to be asked in case one of the other teams that are a threat on the general classification, like UAE Team Emirates or Moss attacking on these final climbs, and of course, there's Remco himself attacking on the climbs. If somebody has to chase, will Jonas Vingegaard chase before the race leader's red jersey of Sepp Kuss, and then they keep Primoz Roglic back there and hope that his form continues to get better and better, and maybe Remco Evenepoel has another off day here in the final 2 weeks of the Vuelta a España. But the tactical messes that Soudal Quickstep have had throughout the early parts here, the first 9 stages of the Vuelta a España, they have to stop right here. There's not going to be any more individual time trial stages left for Remco Evenepoel to be able to make up for some of those tactical mistakes that we saw all the way through and up until stage 9 of this year's Vuelta a España. So when the attacks come in these later mountain stages, he's got to be careful, Remco Evenepoel that is. If it's anybody going up the road that's not wearing a yellow and black jersey called Jumbo-Visma, Remco Evenepoel needs to sit back and say, hey, this is not my job. Jumbo-Visma, it's your job. You have the race leader's jersey there with Sepp Kuss. You have Primoz Roglic that's riding good. Jonas Vingegaard looks solid, but possibly his form could be coming up or down. Nobody knows at this moment after finishing the Tour de France. But Remco Evenepoel has to put pressure on Jumbo-Visma, and hopefully it comes in the form of other teams attacking from UAE Team Emirates Enric Mas, of course. Maybe Landa back there gets into an early break of one of these mountain stages and puts some pressure, and you force Jumbo-Visma to have to do all of the work. That way there, when you get into the last climbing mountain of one of these bigger stages here, something like the Col de Tourmalet, you want for sure that one of the three riders from Jumbo-Visma, Sepp Kuss, Jonas Vingegaard, most likely have to be the ones that do the work before we see Primoz Roglic get on there, make the race hard. Then when Remco Evenepoel attacks, maybe he only has Primoz Roglic sitting on his wheel to worry about when he gets up to the finish of these mountain stages, and he only has to keep an eye on one Jumbo-Visma rider instead of three big hitters like he's had to do since stage 6, Nightmare 40 rider break went up the road, and Sepp Kuss later, 2 days later, got himself into the race leader's red jersey. Spectacular individual time trial stage here from Filippo Ganna, the win for Team Ineos. You saw their team dancing in the street. Reminded me when I was a sophomore in high school and I passed my chemistry class at the final last semester and didn't have to go to summer school for chemistry, because right now with Ineos winning today's stage with Filippo Ganna, like I told you they should have been racing for throughout the first 9 stages, now that they've won, they've bumped their F status all the way back up to about a C- right now. And be sure Filippo Ganna still has some fine form to do something and win another stage here at the Vuelta a España, or possibly Geraint Thomas's luck will change because his bike had all kinds of problems in today's individual time trial. So maybe his luck will change and he'll get up the road one of these early breaks and possibly win another stage for Team Ineos to bump up their rating that already came up from an F to a C-, and maybe they'll get themselves up there to a C+ or B- here when the Vuelta is all said and done. Make sure you guys like and subscribe. I'll see you on the next edition real soon.